919 FM, your morning of impact. Sam Marshall shares uplifting stories and conversations with people making Johannesburg and the world a better place.
So let's have that conversations. This week, the National Shelter Movement of South Africa is heading to Sydney, Australia to take part in the 5th World Conference of Women's Shelters, the world's largest gathering of people working on the front line to end gender-based violence. For the first time, this global summit is being hosted in the Southern Hemisphere, bringing together more than 1,000 delegates from over 100 countries. Joining me now is Greer Schoeman from the NSMSA to talk about what South Africa will be sharing with the world and what this means for strengthening the fight against GBV at home and abroad. Greer, good morning and thanks for joining me.
Good morning.
Greer, let's talk about the World Conference of Women's Shelters and why it is such a significant platform and what your organization will be doing at the event.
Sure, thank you so much. So the Sydney 5th World Conference of Women's Shelters, as you said, brings together women's rights organizations that work in the response to gender-based violence, as well as various government stakeholders. And it really serves as a platform for knowledge exchange, sharing best practices, but also for us as, in particular, the National Shelter Movement, coming from the South African context where there are very, very high rates of gender-based violence. It also forms an opportunity for us to hopefully strengthen some connections and increase resources and partnerships to strengthen the response back home.
I can only imagine, Greer, that as an organization, you've got a very particular mandate in terms of what you try to represent, what kind of talking points, what you'd like to kind of maybe not force as the agenda, but definitely engage with as an agenda. How are you positioning the GBV fight in South Africa on this global platform? And also, what kind of, you said also strengthening relationships, what kind of relationships are you looking forward to developing?
Mm-hmm. So the National Shelter Movement in this context is very exciting. We actually have 3 different panelists that will be presenting at the conference. And these are also the 3 abstracts that are representative for the continent. So in terms of that, we are presenting not only the South African voice and South African learnings, but we also are spotlighting some of the issues that we are facing as a continent and as the voice of Africa. We know that a woman in this country is killed. 3 women in the country are killed every day. That's every 8 hours. So that brings our national femicide levels 5 times higher than the world average. That means that working in the sector in South Africa, you actually come with such a wealth of knowledge. And it's an unfortunate knowledge, but it is a wealth of knowledge in terms of responses. At the same time, when we're talking about forming strategic partnerships, one of the unfortunate things is the resourcing for this work, even though it is such a critical response, only is funded up to about, when you average it out, 41%. That means that beyond that 41%,
that's incredibly low.
Yeah, that is what is provided through the Department of Social Development. So what one has to do is really go above and beyond to identify international donors who will assist, other international NGOs, where responses are better resourced. We can sometimes form international partnerships where there are promising models that we then try to also implement in South Africa. A lot of this is mostly focused on prevention. But of course, the big funding gap where we work and where we respond to is essential services. And I just want to talk about that very briefly.
Yes.
So as the National Shelter Movement, we are located across the country. We represent a network of over 100 shelters. And when women hear of a shelter, or the general public hears of a shelter, you may think, okay, what we are providing is a place of safety. And yes, on a very basic level, it is a critical point of crisis intervention. It's a last port of call for women who are seeking to escape violent relationships and possible death. But we still have to provide so much beyond that. So beyond the accommodation and providing, basic things like your 3 nutritious meals per day, we also have to provide things like emotional support.
Yes.
There's an element of skills development, such that when people are reintegrating into society, that they actually have an opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet, and that they have the skills to be able to be economically empowered. We also provide legal and psychosocial assistance, so we'll provide court support. All shelters are staffed by social workers, and in that way, you really have to actually respond to a breadth of issues. We also have to recognize that we talk about women and children. And so when women are coming to the shelters, we still need to check. We don't want to disrupt the lives of the children too much. So we need to find ways to ensure that they're still able to attend school. And so the mandate of shelters extends much beyond the essential service, because there are not enough other social supports that actually come through from our government. And so it often relies on other volunteers within communities. We also do have our church groups and religious groups in general that come forward and assist. But it is very, very challenging. And working in this space, you have to be so innovative, because it's not only responding to the crisis in terms of the person who needs assistance, but also constantly dealing with this crisis of funding.
And I can only imagine that part of that challenges ours also is that just over the last couple of years, especially since COVID, the increase for your services has drastically increased. And as you've quite eloquently explained, that is not just providing shelter, but it is a host of additional auxiliary services that you have to provide for these women as they come into the shelter. In some instances, it could be women with their children. But talk to me about just the increase in terms of the demand for your service.
Mm-hmm. So the demand has increased across the country. You are quite correct. And in the face of this, what we have found is also that women in their communities are organizing and creating shelters. Now, that actually comes with its own challenges.
Yes,
because
I can only imagine.
You can't just, these women themselves require quite specialized services. And then in order to, as much as it is a shelter, it is also an organization that needs to be run efficiently. And in the absence of government increasing its funding or providing sufficient funding, we found that communities have taken actions into their own hands, and in particular women. So one of the things that we have responded to as the National Shelter Movement is to develop what we call the action learning model. And what that has done is we've taken in the country 11 shelters over the last 2 years and sought to assist them in terms of plugging in some of their skills gaps. So it is a comprehensive program that runs over time, and it has a couple of different components. The one is looking at things such as your basic governance and management capacity, your HR policies, these kinds of things. Now, this is essential so that those shelters are compliant and actually eligible to receive state grants and international funding in the first place. So those are your basic requirements. We then also look at how do we do resource mobilization strategies for their future sustainability, and then a core and ongoing focus that we do across all of our shelters is to look at things such as how do we provide wellness and survivor-centered services. So how do we ensure that the intervention really does improve the life of the woman once she exits that shelter and assist in terms of ensuring a safe pathway out. Now, prior to getting to the shelter itself presents a challenge. And so we've also developed a handbook that people can actually download from our website that helps women to develop their own safety plan for how it is that they can escape. Because the process of wanting to leave and actually proceeding to leaving tends to be a bit of a gap.
Yeah.
So that is some of that's some of what we focus on and how we'll try to respond to the increasing levels of violence that we see.
I think the other thing also, Greer, which is quite notable when you take us through those innovations, the conference theme in part will also be focusing on innovation and collaboration. And I think which is a massive win for NSMSA is the idea that you have been innovating, that you've got practical examples of what innovation looks like in this space, in this very difficult circumstances. And that's also, I think, a powerful contribution that the South African delegation will be making to the Fifth World Conference of Women's Shelters, as the idea that and I've been very privy. I get your newsletters, I get your PR releases, so I see a lot of the work that your organization does. I don't think the ordinary South African does that. But all this innovation that you've been able to develop, these interventions, a lot of these interventions were developed because of the need to, and you've seen the gap in certain spaces, but also because of lack of resources. That I think could be a valuable contribution to this World Conference.
I agree. You could not have put it better. So, working in a context where there is not a lot of resources does really show in South Africa how it is that your local communities can work together to respond. And so we see, for example, in rural communities, the way that they will organize, and you'll find basic things like pastors' wives, for example, organizing to say what are the spaces that we can provide that are safe, because these are culturally perhaps some of the women that can stand up and have their voices heard and be able to create this. We've got increasingly, which is quite difficult in the African context, creating things such as shelters that are now available for people of different gender identities, because we know that there is a gap within that regard. And all of these services and responses really come from the ground up. Now, I don't want to say that we are entirely left out. Government does support. We do some collaborative conferences. We have our annual shelter in Durban, where we do have various government departments who do participate. But we still do find that the push does not come without our communities coming forward and ensuring that our governments are being held to account. It is also so exciting, again, when we look at some of the panelists and what it is that they will be talking about. So we know that we have, I started by talking about our 3 different members.
Yes.
So Joy Lang, who is one of our board members, she's actually the one who will be focusing on issues of resourcing and sustainability. And that will be looking at issues of how it is that we've done our capacity building, how it is that organizations have been able to sustain services in times of funding gaps, and the kind of advocacy. And I think, again, South Africans at this point are quite aware in terms of the media coverage of some of the things that have happened in terms of DSD and disbursements of funds and effective support. And that has a direct translation to how it is that shelters actually operate. So we've had several instances. Most of your local shelters that are located in provinces must then be funded by your provincial DSD. So there's a lot of difference there. And what we have then found is that our departments of social development are not effectively providing a sustained service, not providing those resources on time. And so it's got to do with salaries that end up being delayed, but on a more immediate level, things such as being able to provide food, sanitary products. And that, again, is some of what we will be sharing in terms of the innovations that we've done as the National Shelter Movement, where we've got this network that is in constant communication. And so the one shelter may receive a big donation of an item that over-caters, whether it is a particular kind of food or whether it is some kind of hygiene product, and they will then communicate through the National Shelter Movement Secretariat, and we will then disperse and get these to under-resourced shelters.
Yeah.
So where there is a little bit extra, we really do try and mobilize and find ways to ensure that those who do not have actually are protected.
Yeah, and I think that's super clever. We're running out of time, but the other thing that I also want to note to our audience is that the NSMSA will also be facilitating the Africa Regional Caucus at the conference, and you are currently running a bunch of support systems, one of them, or campaigns that people can get involved in. You've got a Back a Buddy campaign. So if you are a supporter of Back a Buddy and you're listening to the show, you can find out more about how you can support the National Shelter Movement South Africa's work there. You've got a helpline, advocacy. Greer, as we wrap up, where can people get hold of you? And I think it's important for people just to follow the journey. You know, sometimes as listeners, you might not be ready to get involved, roll up your sleeve, volunteer or donate, but you can always give your time, learn a little bit more about the organization, and down the line, whether you are running an institution, organization, or business, when the time comes for you to find a partner, a meaningful partner that's doing amazing work within the communities, that understands exactly what their functions and capabilities are all about, and have shown real measurable, not only growth, but success, I think your organizations stand head and shoulders above most others.
Thank you for that, those very kind words, and it is always very encouraging when the work that is being done by the women of this country, by the different advocates, is being recognized. In terms of getting hold of us, we have a website that's nsmsa.org.za, nsmsa.org.za, and you can get lots of information, everything that I've discussed in terms of services, partners, you'll be able to find there. Also, just in terms of our National Shelter Helpline, this is another flagship of the National Shelter Movement. It's a 24-hour GBV helpline. The number is 0800 001 005. That's 0800 001 005. It's a zero-rated number. You can send an SMS, WhatsApp, or please call me to 082-057-8600, 082-057-8600, or email us on infohelpline@nationalnsm.org.za. So in this context, you then have the opportunity to talk to a trained social worker if you want advice, if you are unsure, or if you do need a placement. This is the number to call. We encourage the public to reach out, and we will assist as best as we can.
Greer, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks for talking to us. And yeah, we wish you loads of success at the 5th World Conference for Women's Shelters. And then when you come back, hopefully you can join us again and do a report back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. That's Greer Schoeman from the National Shelter Movement of South Africa. They are in Sydney, Australia, and they're taking part in the 5th World Conference of Women's Shelters. It's the world's largest gathering of people working on the front line to end gender-based violence. For the first time, this global summit is being hosted in the Southern Hemisphere, bringing together more than 1,000 delegates